hurricane season officially ended at midnight last night.
And hallelujah to that, right? While it was an active season, fortunately, we were spared.
And I talked with WLOX Chief Meteorologist Jeansonne about this hurricane season. And here is Chief Meteorologist Jeansonne. Thanks for joining us. We're talking about hurricane season. It just wrapped up, and we once again here in South Mississippi are fortunate. It's been a few years since we saw significant impacts from a hurricane. That was from Hurricane Zeta in 2020. And although we did get a scare from Francine, we really didn't see any major impacts this year.
Yeah, I guess the closest call we had this year was from Hurricane Francine, which made landfall mid-September of this year, made landfall over into Louisiana. We were on the right side of the storm. We were worried about a little bit of storm surge and some rain, and we got some wind from that. But for the most part, 2024 was kind to us as far as hurricane season goes.
But that's not the case everywhere. Here is a list of all of the hurricanes. And you were telling me earlier that this was one of the more active hurricane seasons in the Gulf.
Yes, it definitely was an active season. However, if you remember, if you kind of go back to the beginning of the season, you know, the Colorado State University and also NOAA, they put out these seasonal outlooks for numbers, and they were forecasting higher numbers, you know, the number of storms that could form within the season. Predicting 25, 26 named storms. We really just ended up with 17 named storms for the season. We actually had just 11 hurricanes and 5 major hurricanes. So these numbers are actually pretty significant, but overall, it is an above average season. It's just not as active as it could have been. But the one thing that we're always saying, don't focus on those outlooks. You know, we don't put those out here at WLOX. They are put out by Colorado State University. They're put out by NOAA. They're just kind of sort of to be looked at as guidance of how active a season may be. But the thing that we really focus on is the number of storms that are going to impact land. And what you were just talking about, a record number of storms to impact land in the Gulf. Well, we had the second highest number of landfalling hurricanes along the Gulf Coast this year. That's tied with 2020. Of course, you mentioned that with Hurricane Zeta, which impacted us in 2020. It's also tied with another infamous year, 2005, for all the hurricane landfalls. Of course, we had Francine made landfall September 11th, and that kind of clipped us close. But you know, don't forget about Beryl early on in the season, which was unusual how intense it was for July, the earliest Category 5 hurricane on record. Of course, Florida had a terrible year this year as well.
Yeah, it really did. And Helene got all of the headlines in Florida, and also Florida got several storms here. But the biggest takeaway is really any of these storms could have impacted us in more of a severe way than we actually saw.
Right. It only takes one. And again, that's the thing. The key is preparedness. At the beginning of every hurricane season, have your plan, have your emergency supply kit ready to go, because you know these are pretty close calls. You know, Texas got Beryl early on. Florida took the majority of the major hurricanes this year, but you know, just a tiny shift in those overall steering patterns could steer one of these storms our way, and that's where you got to stay prepared every season.
Okay, is it too early to make a forecast for next hurricane season already?
The forecast is be prepared.
Be prepared.
It only takes one. You know, I always look back at the hurricane season of 1992. That's a pretty significant year because there was only one hurricane that made landfall in the United States. That was Hurricane Andrew. It ended up being the most costly hurricane on record that year and ever until 2005 Hurricane Katrina.
Okay, all good pointers and good things to keep in mind. Chief Meteorologist Jeansonne joining us this morning.